Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 24. No, we don't answer them 24/7. We do it 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Guy, what do we have?
First one's in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, and he asks, Netflix has done Dolby Vision for many years and it has looked great. Do we think their change to using HDR10/10 Plus will signal decrease in quality? I find the image and dynamic range quality on Amazon, which only does HDR10, is far less than Netflix.
I don't know. I think that I don't think they're getting rid of Dolby Vision, but I'm not sure. So we'll see if we can find out whether they're reverting to something other than Dolby Vision, or they're just simply adding support for HDR10 and HDR10 Plus. There is a big difference between Dolby Vision and HDR10, but less of a difference between Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, because what HDR10 Plus does is attempts to address exactly what Dolby Vision does, which is that Dolby Vision can basically adjust the max fill and max CLL, the where the brightness ranges are, as well as the trims per frame. So Dolby Vision can do that as well as HDR10. So HDR10 Plus. HDR10 sets that for the entire document. So that's why you're probably seeing less dynamic ranges, because they have to set it for the whole thing, and it has to take into account the brightnesses, the midtones, and the dark, and all the trims for the entire piece, rather than being able to change it per scene, which is what Dolby Vision can do. And HDR10 attempts to do many of the same things. I think that the difference is probably a little bit less. The real downside of this is that Dolby is spending an enormous amount of energy and time constantly pushing this forward, whereas HDR10 Plus and HDR10 is really Samsung just not wanting to pay for it. So basically you have someone who is working on, and people are paying them to continue to make color and the dynamic range and everything better, or someone who is just cheap. So that's so when we look at the trajectory of where those things go, when we support, I won't buy a Samsung monitor because I know I won't buy a Samsung monitor. I've bought some in the past, but at this point I don't buy them because I don't want to support this idea that we're not going to pay for, that they don't want to pay for people making our images better. They're just, so it's just a cheap way out. And that's the bummer. And definitely if Netflix cancels Dolby Vision for HDR10 Plus, that would be a big bummer for all of us. So we'll see what happens. It does mean that our Disney and Apple stuff will still look fine, which is it's been better than Netflix the whole time. So next question.
Got one in from David Brady in New York, asking where in the signal chain is the best point for a scaler? Would it make sense as an input to a vision mixer or an output to final destination?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends. It depends on whether your vision mixer does internal scaling or not. If it does, I'd probably let the vision mixer do the scaling. If you're trying to scale, it depends on whether you're trying to scale up or scale down, too. If you're scaling up from 720 to 1080, I would do it before the vision mixer. That way you could scale it up and up to the resolution that your vision mixer's output is set to, so the vision mixer doesn't have to do any extra work in scaling that input and synchronizing it. If you're scaling down, maybe a toss-up. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do it on the output, because if your vision mixer has other inputs that need scaling, that might be, difficult for it to handle, to be handling different incoming signals to scale them to whatever output resolution you're going to make on the fly as you're switching between the two. So it depends on your mixer. It depends on whether, what you're going to and what kind of scaling you're doing, up or down.
Good guy.
Yeah, I was just playing with this in this app, Vizio, since I got it. Kind of giving us a visual. Sometimes diagramming something out helps. So the question is, if you have sources that need to go into a mixer, you have this scaler, and you're wondering where does it need to go to, so I can go to this destination. So, like Courtney said, it just depends. It depends on what the format is of this source, and if the mixer already has scalars, and if there's latency that's involved in that scaling process. A lot of times you want your source to just match your mixer's resolution, and that way there doesn't have to be, it's all native. There's no scaling involved. And in that case, you would need one. I've been to a lot of shows where we have just a rack full of AJFS1s ready to scale anything, because sometimes you don't know what's going to be in the chain. So you might get a source that needs to be scaled, and it's nice to have than not have. The older Blackmagics, this was the case. You had to have a scaler unless everything was native. If you need one on the destination, that's just depends on what that unit is. Is it an encoder? Is it something that you need to upscale or downscale? So if this is a 4K mixer, but the output destination is only, the encoder is only going to take 1080, then yeah, you would need a scaler there. So again, it just depends on what you need. And you might need multiple scalers. So now all of a sudden you're 3, 4 deep or 5 deep in scalers. And that's why in some of these racks, you'll see just a bunch of them.
Yeah, one of the things to keep in mind is that the scalars are going to change your sync. You're going to lose anywhere from a half a frame to a frame and a half, or to even 2 frames on a scalar. Typically, we assume that we're going to lose a half a frame to a frame if we run it through an FS, and sometimes it depends on that. So it's not going to be instantaneous. So we try to avoid putting scalars in front of the switcher because of that. It's going to change, because if you start putting it in front of different things, you end up with different syncs, and that's really the thing you try to avoid. So the other thing is that we do everything we can to have everything, like we're not using any kind of conversions. We want to gen lock where we can. We want to have everything be as high a resolution as we can possibly have within the system limitations that we have there. And we're going to record everything at that through the switcher, and then we're going to scale down to whatever the output has to be. And generally, the thing that we do try to do is we try to match our frame rate to our output frame rate as best we can, because what we don't want to do is number one is we don't want to change the frame cadence. So we don't want to go from 24 to 30 or 24 to 60 or the other way around, because it starts to create hiccups in smooth motion. The other thing that we try to do is be very careful about going especially down from 60 to 30 because we're going to change the nature of the shutter for the what the apparent shutter for our video. So if you go from 60 to 30, it's going to look a lot more framey in the 30 because it's essentially a 90-degree shutter. Instead of a 180-degree shutter, and so because you're throwing half the frames away, so you have the motion blur for 60 frames a second, but you have 30 frames a second going out. So those are things that we kind of think about as far as frame rate. But as far as scaling goes, image scaling, we don't find that there's a dramatic difference between doing it out of the switcher and doing it out of there, as long as you're not doing something like interlace or something like that. We don't find that there's a dramatic change in the value, but we very rarely do it in the switcher. We almost always do it with a Teranex or an FS, for us an FS HDR. Next question.
Brian Stark, Nottingham, Great Britain, asks, Video Assist has an upgrade, and there appears to be many improvements over version 1's comments, opinions, and there's a link here to Petapixel.
Good guy.
Yeah, this is an interesting app. It does get a little pricey. So this is different than the Video Assist that we know and love from Blackmagic. This is an app that goes on an iPad, preferably the larger one with the larger screen. And what it does is it takes an HDMI or an SDI USB input. And so you got to put a little converter like a little Elgato Camlink or something on your iPad. And that allows you to bring the signal in. And then you can get all these tools. I have a device that already does this. So I'm kind of... And I know that they've sold a ton of these things because I used to be a reseller for these units called the Simo Pro. And this has that same kind of app, even more so with all the recording. And this one even has a 4K capability, so you can go with the Simo 4K. And the nice thing is that this integrates into their cage as well. So when you look at it, a whole ecosystem, I mean, this is $143, and that includes the app. So it's already cheaper, and you get the SDI or HDMI bundle. So I don't know if I'd be buying something that is from, unless the comments on this V2 just go off the chain. I'd pay attention to that article and see what people say about it and ask in some of the forums. But from what I've seen out there, the Axoon seems to be the weapon of choice for something like this. Or you would just get the native tools. It depends on who's using it too on set. Sometimes you might have like a script supervisor or something that wants playback or something where they can go back themselves and not have to go ask an operator to roll back and see what that take looked like. So these tools gives them that opportunity to do that. The nice thing is for somebody doing lighting, they can check the color, they can check, bring a false color or something like that to see if they're blown out highlights or the waveforms. So that's where these tools come in handy, not just for checking the framing, but that's usually what most of us are using it for, especially the smaller ones. If you have like a red Komodo or something like that, it's nice to have an app like this because the screen is, well, there is no screen. Well, it's so tiny on a red Komodo that you have to have something, some kind of monitoring.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I'm a fiend for interface. So I don't know, I haven't used the Axon SEMO. Is it SEMO?
SEMO.
Is it SEMO?
SEEMO.
SEMO. So what I haven't seen is its interface. So if the video interface for the app isn't as good as this one, I'd probably lean towards one that had a better interface because I value time over almost everything else. So if I can get to things faster, if it's easier for me to work on something, I will almost always lean towards something that is faster and easier to use than I will towards something that's a little less expensive. So the other question I have is whether, and I haven't tested this with my iPad, I don't know whether we can send an uncompressed signal in, like whether we can send I don't know whether I can connect a UTAP or a mini recorder to it. You don't. It doesn't work that. It doesn't.
No, it's UVC. Once it gets in there, it's squashing it down. So it's never going to be perfect. It's going to have some kind of compression.
Are you sure that it can't see the video?
Because it's a UVC. It'll see it as, it's not necessarily. Those are all UVC input. So that color space is squashed down.
Well, with the mini recorder, it's not a UVC. It doesn't have to be a UVC. Like it can it can deliver uncompressed. Because if you use a mini recorder, the Blackmagic mini recorder, it can deliver uncompressed video to a Mac. So I just don't know whether it can do uncompressed video to an iPad. It'd be interesting to look at. Anyway, so that would be the only thing, because once things are compressed, the level of accuracy is, I don't know what we're looking at now. So that for me, that's the big problem is that I don't know how valuable something is if all I can get is compressed footage I'm not clear that that's of very much value to me, to make that, to go forward with that. So that would be the only question I'd have about using an iPad to make that possible. So we'll see. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, asked, do you agree with National Geographic that the best camera for bird photography overall is the Sony A9III?
Go, Courtney.
I would probably tend to agree with that because, the birds, they move very fast. They flap their wings very fast. And this A9 Mark III is the first full frame with a global shutter system. So it has a full global shutter and is a full frame mirrorless. So you won't see any of that skew or distortion in any fast-moving objects that have a rolling shutter. If you're shooting stills or if you're shooting video, you can see horizontal shifts in things that are moving fast horizontally or usually horizontally. So this one, since it captures the entire frame at the same moment in time with its global shutter, you won't see any horizontal distortion in any fast-moving objects. Also be very good for, besides bird photography, for shooting sports, any fast-moving sports like basketball, things like that, if you're shooting stills especially.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little later. Global shutter is about to become something that is table stakes. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas asks, helping a friend put together a montage of various clips of video from the side of actual skateboards while the tricks are being done, which small camera should they attach to the skateboard to record?
Go ahead, Jesse.
You got plenty of options if you're buying new. There's Insta360, DJI has their Osmo Action, and of course there's GoPro. If I were just getting started, I would not buy new. Instead of buying one GoPro at $300, I'd buy 3 used ones at $100 each, knowing that these are built to be roll cams. And the real fun that you're going to get into is figuring out how to attach this to the skateboard that allows them to do the tricks without knocking the camera off the board. And that's, the journey is the destination kind of production concerns. So enjoy that. And the other thing that you're going to have to think about is batteries. So these action cams chew through batteries so quickly it'll make your head spin. So don't get 3 batteries, get like 10 batteries for them. If you're going to be shooting for an afternoon, if you're going to be shooting for an afternoon in 4K at 60 frames per second, you will burn through them faster than if you were shooting on a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera.
Yeah, I think that I would probably do a little bit of both, which is that I would probably have GoPro is kind of still the leader in this area. You can get a lot of different things there. Their newer ones, a lot of us haven't bought the newer ones. They had kind of a downtime, I think, in the 7, 8, 9 range, where there were heat issues, there were a lot of other issues, and a lot of us stopped buying as many as we used to have. But I think that getting one of the newer ones might make sense, but only after you've done a bunch of testing and a bunch of shooting with older ones. Getting something like a GoPro 5 or 6 is something you can probably buy used, relatively inexpensive. Get a cage for it. Let them destroy a couple as you figure out where the best place is to put it, and you might still get some good footage. But then you may want to move up to a nicer one when you've kind of figured out some of the things that you need to manage. I would love to see this with an Insta360, one of the spherical ones, just because it would be really interesting to see what you, I don't even know what you would get, but being able to restabilize that and put it together could be a really interesting shot. I don't know if I'd want to do it when you're flipping, but as you're doing other things that they have a pretty good chance of success, could be a super interesting. Like if you put one on the tip and had them, do one of those up and around, could be a super interesting shot that no one's seen before. Go ahead, Jesse.
And also, when you break the camera, that's not a problem with skateboard videography. That's like your best footage of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Next one coming in from the QR code is Marilei Shusha Miera in Weeblo and asks, 42-inch monitor with built-in KVM, is this the ultimate work-from-home monitor? And there's a link here to a Dell on B&H.
Okay, Courtney.
Yeah, it looked kind of interesting. I was taking a look at it. It's $900, so it's a little bit pricey for a Dell, but it's 42 inches, which is you're going to have a lot of desk space to put that mother on the on top of your table there, and hook it up to multiple inputs. So I'm not sure if the KVM it does have 2 DisplayPort and 2 HDMI inputs, and a USB-C input/output that can still charge your. Maybe run power to your laptop and pull a video image off of it at the same time. So that might be really handy to have in a pinch. I'm not sure if it does the keyboard switching for KVM, but it does have multiple inputs, and apparently it can put a 4-up from its multiple inputs with a multi-view.
It looks pretty interesting. I mean, it's there's a lot going on there. So I think that it's a big monitor. 42 inches. It does say connect up to 4 PCs. So it does look like you could have it be it could be a really interesting product. It'd be really interesting to see what the user experience is about how do you get from one to the other. I think that'd be something I'd be interested to see. So anyway, yeah. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Reina Populus in Situate to ask, George Kennedy is inspiring. What does the industry and people do to manage special diet needs and diabetes when there is no real control over schedules, work, meals, stress, etc., and a workday rolled around here?
One thing if you're working, it depends on where you're working, at a location or at home. At home, I cook almost everything I eat. I almost from scratch, almost all the time. And it's something that is really hard to do when you get started, and then as you go through it. And I have to admit, during COVID, I gained a lot more weight than I thought I would, and I'm still trying to get rid of it. But I'm much more healthy now than I was before. I'm just not. I haven't lost a lot of weight yet. But a lot of this has been changing that lifestyle a little bit, and it's been hard to get that kind of figured out. I think that one of the things I do now when I travel is I'll do everything I can to find a hotel that has a kitchen in the hotel rooms. So generally those residents and those types of things. I'm looking for kitchens, and then the first night that I'm out for 4 nights or whatever, I just go buy groceries. Like I don't want to eat out like ever, and so I never want to eat out like ever. Just in case you're wondering, if I'm going out to eat out, it's so that I can hang out with everybody. But you'll see me usually eat super salad because I just view eating out as the enemy. So so I think that's one of the things. I also carry enough food that I carry enough some kind of healthy bars or usually nuts and fruit in a little box when I'm at some location, and I'll snack on those things so I'm not tempted to snack on the stuff that is there otherwise. And I have enough food that if I don't get the kind of food that I want for lunch, I don't need to eat it. Like, so I've kind of, and that's kind of the direction that I've gone with most of what I do. I have to admit that I avoid being on set like the plague. Like, so I manage teams, I manage stuff. I'm going down to be on something recent soon, but I generally try to avoid doing that if I can. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I see this question more as a philosophical one than as a production question. And I feel like if you approach it from a philosophical viewpoint, it's almost a faulty premise because there is no final word on what you put in your body beyond you. Like you are the ultimate line of what goes in, the data in that you allow. So this is a question of preparation in the same way that any producer might prepare the camera kit and have very specific and clear needs of what they need in their camera kit to execute the production. It's incumbent on the filmmaker or the producer, or whoever it is in the team, to prepare the data in that they're going to put into their body. So I don't see any wiggle room on this at all. That's your responsibility, and it is an executable task to control what goes in the same way that you would control what camera you're using, what switcher you're using, what microphone you're using, and that's your job as a human, not as a filmmaker, but as a human being.
I think that the big thing is when you're tired, you have a tendency, your guard starts to go down. And so a lot of this comes to doing something ahead of time, setting yourself up for those things. Once you're there and once you're hungry, you're just going to eat whatever's in front of you. And so a lot of it's figuring that out. I will admit it. I also eat a lot of protein and fat for breakfast before an event. And it's very rare for me to need lunch. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it is tough to be on the set, especially a set that you don't have control over, and trying to manage anything with a special diet. I've seen a lot of people. I'm not a diabetic, but I play one on TV. But I'm working my way up to diabetes. I'm working on it, especially on things like commercials where I worked in television commercials for years and years, and they're notorious for having great caterers. And so it's always so tempting when you break for that lunch to have the 4 different entrees, to try a little bit of each one of them. So you tend to overeat. I have seen a lot of people on the set who are diabetic or have to have special dietary needs, even when there's a great caterer, to bring their own food from home. And a solution for that is sometimes you got to keep it refrigerated. You may not have access to a refrigerator on set. Especially if you're out on location, there may not be one where you can store your lunch. And sometimes it can be, 6 hours to even longer if they pay meal penalty before you get a chance to eat. So there are these refrigerated lunch boxes that are out there that are pretty handy, that'll keep your special diet food refrigerated and fresh to keep it from spoiling in the heat. So look into those if you're having to manage your own diet and bring food from home, to make sure that you're eating the right amounts and the right stuff if you have gluten-free or other dietary requirements, lactose intolerant. And I've seen also the problem with diabetics too is insulin. I worked with a camera assistant for many years who was diabetic, and he had an insulin pump, and that has reduced the need somewhat to have to take a break to do an insulin injection or to manage your blood sugar carefully. When it's difficult to do that if there's a lot of candy and sweets that are available on the set all the time. So it's very tempting, and you have to exercise a great deal of self-control to stay away from the craft service table.
And I, as a producer, a lot of times we are notorious for not handing out sweet snacks until late in the afternoon. And that has to do just has to do with energy in general. We just found that people were more focused when we didn't have M&Ms in the morning. Next question.
Got one coming in from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada, asking what we know microwaves interfere with productions. What about toasters, clothes washer, dryer, or small toaster ovens?
Go, Jesse.
Absolutely, yes, but in a very different way. And that is that we've been shooting in houses and somebody starts a load of wash and the breaker just completely flops out. And we have to set some parameters about what people are allowed to do. And the people living in the house can do while we have all of our lights and cameras running.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, this is particularly a problem if you're running off a generator. And, the craft service will plug in their 1,200-watt coffee maker, and then the wardrobe department will get out the hair dryers to dry out the wardrobe, and the makeup department will plug in the curling iron, and suddenly one leg of the generator goes down. So you have to watch out for people plugging toasters in, which consume a lot of power, or those radiant heaters that you see them bring onto the set that are not propane powered, they're electric. And clothes dryers, of course, a lot of times clothes dryers, once you start them as a safety issue, you can't open the door and it's difficult to stop them sometimes. And they're a problem for sound. Somebody starts a clothes dryer and you go, well, the clothes are half dried. If we shut it off now, or half washed, if we shut it off now, there's a chance they'll mildew, or the dryer will mildew by the time we're out of here. So you have to deal with those problems with the homeowner. And also the refrigerator was a constant problem for me to have to, if you're shooting a kitchen show or something in someone's home, you have to shut off the refrigerator because it's going to be coming on and coming off and coming on and coming off at various times, interfering with your soundtrack and making it uneven. These days, it's a little easier to use an AI filter to remove those kind of sounds, but I used to have to just shut them off all the time, and I always put a Post-it note on my recorder that says, turn on refrigerator, because if you leave and forget to turn it back on, that is a big sin when the homeowner comes back home and they let him back in the house and they find out that all the stuff is thawed out in the freezer and the refrigerator has been off for 6 hours.
Yeah, the sound from a refrigerator is the thing that just kills us, more than anything else. Next question.
Robert Linkroom in Belmont Shore, California asks, regarding lens cleaning, lens cloth or lens tissue?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Lens tissue, because it's disposable. A lens cloth, if you're cleaning off a lens and there's a little piece of grit that you pick up, if it goes into that lens cloth, it'll stay on that lens cloth to the next lens that you go to clean with it, and it'll scratch the next lens because you picked up that little piece of sand or grit off of one lens or something else that you rubbed that cloth over. So I think I always use lens tissue with a lens cleaning agent, wetting agent, to clean a lens with, and then quickly dispose of the tissue afterwards. They're not as absorbent, but they are guaranteed to be clean and lint-free.
Yeah, and I pack cameras with these. So these are micro fibers. So there is one there because what I don't want to do is not have anything available. So these are packed. Every camera has one of these. These are just like, I don't know, you buy a pack of them for $7. There's 50 of them or something. So, but they're there, and I do inspect them before I use them on a lens. But I have one there just to make sure it's there. But I use lens tissues as well. And I have both. You have to be very careful with some of these, but there's some of these these are like one-use alcohol versions if something's really mucked up on it that you have to get off there. Otherwise, I want to use dry ones. The other thing to note is there's a thing that looks like, I don't have it in reach, but it looks like a little rocket. It's a little blower, and it's got a blower and a brush. And a lot of times I will start with the blower and the brush. If anything looks like it's actually dirty, you want to try to get all that stuff off. Any larger particulate, you want to get off there first. So try to blow it off, try to brush it off gently, and then you wipe it off to make sure that it's clean. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, why are most pro media suppliers in New York or California? I found one supplier in Atlanta for pro lighting, but not much going on in the central U.S. or Texas. Why?
I'll go with Jesse.
You need a lot of customers to justify a physical store at this point, and the only markets that have the volume of customers who come in and do either impulse purchases or need it today, right now, because we're in the middle of a production, are really Los Angeles and New York. I imagine a store could survive in Atlanta on that model, but I don't know if they'd thrive, and I don't know how long they'd thrive if they did at all.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it depends if you're talking about expendables or if you're talking about rentals of professional media equipment. Because production tends to be centered in New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, or New York and Los Angeles, and sometimes Vancouver, you will find that the rental companies, if they are larger rental companies, will open satellite rental facilities in each of those major production centers so that they can balance their equipment rentals between the different cities. And it's tough for a single company. This equipment is very expensive, and when you rent it out, it gets damaged, and you have to have the ability to repair it or service it between each rental. So that requires a lot of work and a lot of setup, and it's difficult to maintain a AV equipment rental company unless there's a whole lot of traffic. In some of these smaller cities, like let's say Austin, Paul, where you are, you may have 2 features a year that come and shoot there, where there's 50 shooting in Atlanta probably at any one time, and probably 10 or 20 shooting in a lot of television shows. About 50 or 60 television shows shooting in Los Angeles, spread amongst all the studios and all the warehouses out there that are used as television studios these days. So there's a pretty good market for that.
Mickey said the businesses locate themselves where businesses saying that there are suppliers everywhere. Do not limit yourself to the few you can find online. James Haldane said population base. David Brady said because New York and California rule. So it has been rare for me to be in a city that I can't find what I need. Like just to be clear, like if with a little bit of planning and a little bit of figuring stuff out, it's been very rare. So for instance, we were in Dallas. We needed a bunch of stuff that we needed a truck full of gear, and we found Dallas Lighting and Grip. And they rented us a truck. It was a very well-built truck with everything that we possibly needed, well-packed, well put together, as good as anything we'd get in L.A. But we didn't, there were 3 or 4 of them in Dallas, and we were able to find those. The big players, of course, are 4Wall and PRG. So if you go to PRG, that used to be VER, and they're in many cities that are available. And if they're not in the city they can ship to it. I mean, for those of us who do larger productions, you just tell them when and where it needs to be, and oftentimes you can get that there. But I will say that for the most part, you can find it's got to be a really
recording
pretty small
in progress
to not be within an hour of a grip and rental, grip and lighting kind of location, and even camera and so on and so forth. They are as Nikki stated, tucked in places. We used to rent from one place that was literally somebody's garage, but it was probably $2 million worth of they have a bigger place now. But for a long time, VideoFax in San Francisco was like in Lee's garage, and sometimes you would even, once you got to know her and once you got to know they would like just tell you what the code is. You open it up, go grab your stuff, and be sitting out like in a little square, and you go grab it and leave. And so there's lots of places that have those things. So I think that you want to talk to people in this community and in other communities, asking where do you rent your hardware, where do you rent your cameras, lights, and so on and so forth. A lot of times you can find fixers that will know where those things are. I mean, I've been renting cameras and mics in Rome, in Lagos, in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in Cambodia. So they're everywhere. You just have to know how to look for them. Next question.
QR code question coming in from Jane J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois, asking what NAS will work with our remote cameras and security systems so we can preview and also broadcast streams for events.
So there's a couple questions there. To me, security cameras and security systems and remote cameras, I just don't know what you mean and what you're planning to do there. So do you need them to be on 24/7? Do you need them to be on for a couple hours? Do you need them to be on, Mickey's asking, are you asking about an NVR, not a NAS? So those are some of the questions I would have for you is how do you want to use that video? Do you want to use it while it's recording? So, I mean, there are systems that will let you sit there and have growing files. There are ways to that you could be grabbing onto it while it was going, or do you just want to be able to clip things off, or how are you using it inside of the system? Would tell us a lot about what it is. I don't think we can necessarily answer that. The two that we would probably lean towards, I mean, the one that's probably the most popular is as a NAS within the people that I know are probably not Ubiquity, but Ubiquity has its own systems for that. But Synology are ones that, as far as a NAS goes, but it really depends on what you're doing. Next question.
CJ Covell in Cincinnati, Ohio asks, "What's the Ghibli Studio test?"
Before we get started, I'll show the one that I did. I think he's referring to the one that I did this morning. I posted on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. So yesterday, ChatGPT, OpenAI released something, and you can just easily say, put up a picture and make it look like Studio Ghibli, and I just had to test it. I was like, well, what is it going to actually do? So this is so I took this photo. This is let's see here. There we go. So that's the original photo that this was based on, and I just threw it in and said, make this look like Studio Ghibli, and I got this. So this is what it converted to. And then I said, change the background to San Francisco, make sure the Golden Gate Bridge is in the background, and I got that. So it's so you just, but I didn't. It wasn't a big complicated prompt. I didn't do a lot of other things, and it simply simplified it and really made that conversion. So that was the test that I was referring to when I said it. A lot of people are posting those right now. I mean, everybody's like converting everything to that just to see what it looks like. And so I had to try. I had to know. So that now I know what that looks like. Go ahead, Jesse.
I have a completely different answer, completely different reading of this question. And we're going to start with Porco Rosso for this answer. And towards the end of Porco Rosso, there's a scene where Porco Rosso is preparing for the final battle of the film. And he's got a pile of bullets, and he picks each one up to see if it's the right weight and balance to shoot his enemy. And he has a pile of bullets he's going to use and a pile of bullets that aren't quite right for the job he's going to do the next day. And he's doing this all by feel. When you apply for a job at Studio Ghibli, they have a really rigorous testing system to see if you're a good fit for their team. And these tests go so deep as sharpening pencils to spec. They want their pencils sharpened in a certain way to a certain sharpness if you're going to be drawing in the Ghibli style. They have a watermelon slice. You have to be able to cut the watermelon the way that you're instructed that reflects your understanding of the complexity of the jobs that you're going to be doing, like right down to how you cut a watermelon. So this is how I understood the Ghibli test was the test that incoming animators have to take to see if they're a fit.
Yeah, this one was specific to what's happened over the last day. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you don't know what a Ghibli is, you're too old. So don't apply for the job. Or you don't like anime, or you don't like Miyazaki, or any of those reasons. You won't know what any of those characters are, so you'll definitely fail the test. Just move along.
Yeah, and Ken Jordan said OpenAI new image generator also works well with create a Pixar image. And in the style of Pixar has worked in Midjourney for a long time. so I use it a lot. In the style of Pixar, I use it a lot for my examples when I'm doing stuff in Keynote. Just over a plain white background, I'm looking for a character that looks confused or upset or happy or excited or whatever that is. But the idea, I don't think we're that much closer. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about this. My opinion is that I don't think we're that much closer to seeing a feature film or much more than a commercial done with AI. I think that it's much more complicated than people think it is, to do something that people are going to care about. It's hard to produce movies that people care about, let alone letting AI kind of run through it. It's just going to be bland. That said, I think being able to visualize, if you take what we just looked at there, being able to visualize your ideas so that you can sell the idea of a movie, or you can sell those things, or if you're a teacher and you want to have fun examples of something on your document, or if you're doing a keynote presentation or PowerPoint presentation, you want to have great images that are there. That is something that people can use today, yesterday, a year ago. So I think that's what's exciting as far as being able to visualize things effectively. I think that when people talk about it overtaking the entertainment industry, I'm not sure if it's going to, I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying I don't think this got us that much closer. Next question.
Got one coming in from some guy in Seattle asking, is Blackmagic putting pressure on the industry with pricing? Red just dropped the Komodo by a couple grand.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, they were bought by Nikon. And Nikon bought Red in order to expand their, Nikon was kind of fallen by the wayside. It has been, their lunch has been eaten by Canon and all the newer Blackmagic and all the other cinema cameras, Sony especially. So this is their attempt to capture more of a prosumer and video capture type audience, and use their sensor technology from Red along with the lens technology of Nikon. So we'll see they're dropping prices to play in that neighborhood of the lower priced, prosumer edge of the cinema market. So I think we'll see how much of an inroad they make. The Nikon brand has dropped a bit, and they're keeping the Red branding. So although they are owned 100% by Nikon now, so we'll see if they ever change the branding away from Red back to Nikon. See if that works for them.
Go, Jesse.
I don't think Blackmagic has the muscle to force Red to drop their prices by almost half. I think the industry is putting the pressure on Red. Like, if those cameras aren't moving at 5,000, 3,000 is such a significant drop that my guess is they were going to be sitting on the shelves collecting dust for way too long for Nikon to be comfortable, especially if they're going to release another camera in the next 6 months or week or so whenever NAB is. Like, they just got to get rid of those things before the next round comes out, and they weren't moving. That's a nearly 50% drop. That's industry pressure, not from any one camera manufacturer.
Oh, the only thing I'll say is that they did match the price of the Pixis, and almost every video that I've seen this morning was comparing it to the Blackmagic camera. So it was like it was definitely like they definitely paid attention to where that is, and the word on the street is that Blackmagic moved a lot of those cameras. So many. So, and I think that when you see this huge surge, there's obviously a demand for a film level camera at $3,000. That is not a Sony form factor of like an FX3, because the ones that people keep on bringing up when they talk about this price drop is they're comparing it to the FX3 and the Pixis. Like, those are the ones that you see everyone talking about. And the FX3 is a weird format, in my opinion, like a weird camera format for it, and because it's just not a box. Like, a lot of us just want boxes, and so the Pixis is the one that was the box at that price point, and now they've said, oh, we can do the box at that price point too. I don't know if they're making any money at it, but I think that they had to get down to that level. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the question, because as this news dropped in a lot of the forums, people were just bringing it up that Blackmagic put pressure on the industry. And I was just like, is that true? But it seemingly is. I mean, if you look at the Pixis price point, I mean, it's $2,995. So if you look at what the Komodo was, it was $5,995. So to drop that
right to that point.
Yeah. And then the other thing to look at, though, is if you jump to the starter pack, by the time you start loading in all these accessories, especially the Red Media, these 512s, you're up $5,500 once you get the handle and everything that you need. Did they sell a lot on B&H? You could see already that there's 29 reviews, 74 questions, 137 answers. So a lot of people are talking about this question. I haven't been seeing it on the street or in rental houses. It all depends on the workflow, what kind of color you want. A lot of people love the Red Raw workflow and the grading of that. So, but other people are saying, well, if you're going to get a 6K, might as well just step up and go get one of the newer Komodo X's. But I just wouldn't buy anything right before NAB. I mean, this is just exciting news, but we're going to see what happens with Nikon having acquired Red and all the technology, because we're going to start to see their lens lines, which I didn't know this. You could actually take the Nikon Z mount, and you can use Sony lenses on that. So that's exciting too. So with the Red Komodo X, you can use Sony e-glass on that model with the adapter, which is very cool. So if you are a Sony owner of a lot of glass already, like our friend Greg Gibson has like every single lens, this would be a nice foray into that world.
Yeah, Mickey said that the Pixis was a massive headache of a camera to work with. He said, "Want green flashes on your SDI output? Get a Pixis." Accessories for Pixis add up as well as along with the CF Express cards. Jack Cannon said a lot got sold and a lot got returned. Lots of reviews out there, but they all have caveats. The Pixis and Matthew LeConte says that Pixis shoots B-RAW only, no ProRes or other codecs, and that's the case also with some of the other cameras like the 12K and stuff like that. Well, the 12K, if you really want to get the whole frame, you have to switch over. So yeah, I think that those are all valid things. And again, I just heard that they sold a lot. I haven't used the Pixis, so I don't have a reference point for them. I do think that I think that by moving this price point down, we're going to see global shutter becoming something that if you're calling yourself a film camera, you got to have global shutter. If they keep this one running and they keep releasing it, I think that if they're not just trying to dump their product before NAB, I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
You're looking at a Pixis right now. We've been shooting on it for 2 weeks.
It
ain't no Red Komodo.
No, right. There you go. There's your comparison review. But I think that what people saw was that there was a price. There is this like sub $3,000 price point that if you get underneath it, there's a lot of people that want to do interviews. They're not trying to do an action film. They're not trying to do even a film. They're just trying to make things look. They're doing their interviews. They're doing their industrial videos. They're doing those types of things. They fashion themselves as a filmmaker someday. And at under $3,000, you see a lot of movement in that area. Over $3,000, people have to be a little bit more serious about what they're doing. They got to know where they're going to spend where that money's going to go. And I think that's what I think that's what Red found. Where Nikon found was that they needed to have something there, or they weren't going to make any movement. And I think they needed to do it before NAB because who knows what's going to come out next week from Blackmagic. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the other thing is to check with your local rental house. It's not always good to have a relationship with your rental houses that are within, a driving distance, and ask what they have and what do they see going out, because that kind of tells you where the industry is going, unless it's just predominantly corporate or something. But here in town, we see a lot of FX6s going out. So in this same price range, if I'm looking at, I know Jack Cannon's got FX6s as well. It's that ecosystem with fast turnaround, autofocus capabilities, and it's just more of a form factor that's traditional. Some of these box cameras, they're more for a film set, putting matte boxes and rails and the whole 9 yards. The FX6 and FX9, actually the FX9 we've built out like that as well, where you can have just a ton of accessories loaded onto it. So it just depends on what you're shooting and what is it going into. Because if you can find some footage online that is in RAW, I think they might have some on the Red site, and bring it into Resolve. It's beautiful. I mean, to grade it is a joy. It's just, there's so much there. But realistically, how fast do you need to get this done? That's what we got to talk about, the entire ecosystem, not just the camera, the sensor, the form factor. It's who's gonna finish this thing for you.
Yep, absolutely. And I switch back and forth. The two main ones that I use under $10,000 are the Blackmagic 12K because it's really flexible. I'm doing lots of crazy frame rates and stuff like that, and it's easier for me to do some of the pieces that I need to do there, or the FX6 when I'm actually doing production. So those are the two that I'm kind of going back and forth with in the sub $10,000 range. I had Scarletts and before the predecessor to the Komodos, and the fans were so bad that I stopped using them, and then just never considered Red again. So I haven't used a Red camera for a decade now. Next question.
Next one in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, asking, with OpenAI 4.0 image generator and Kling, you can create any B-roll you can imagine. What happens when clients start creating their own B-roll? And he's got a link to a YouTube video.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good point. Yeah, go, Jesse.
I kind of feel like this misunderstands a little bit about at least what I do. Maybe I have some blind spots because of the line of work I do, but all the B-roll, every video we create is is commissioned by a member of a community who wants to talk to their community. And there are huge like tiers of trust that we need to think about as we're creating that material. So all the B-roll we've shot for the last 10 years has been exclusively impossible to shoot in any other environment than with our clients who are building a specific message to communicate to their community. I know that there are industries of B-roll that are going to get wiped out completely by AI, but the vast majority of the work that we do, and we work a lot in the corporate space, is so tethered to community communication that is so reliant on trust that it's hard for me to see that being replaced by AI, especially when you see how communities respond to AI, that it's nearly universal, like revulsion when an in-member of a community tries to pass off AI as a means of expression within that community. So I know that it will affect industries. I know that there will be industries that will be significantly changed, but I don't think necessarily devastated, just changed in such ways that they can't ever go back. But I do think that there's an overestimation of the damage that AI will do to B-roll shooting. And I say that as somebody who's only shot B-roll that couldn't be created outside of the environments that we created it in.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it's moving in that direction, especially for B-roll where you don't have to have a character speaking sync sound. If you go to YouTube and look up Laszlo Gal, Gaal, and he's had access to Veo 2, which is the new Google's new motion video, text to video generation. And there's a commercial, he does a spec commercial for Porsche called the Paisanos that looks like it takes place in Italy. And it's a 1-minute commercial for a Porsche. It tells a little story. It's great. It's humorous. And you would never know it is all AI generated. And there's even a behind the scenes film that it shows the making of the commercial, that there's only one shot in the behind the scenes film that was used a camera, and all the rest of it used Veo 2 to do the generation. And it shows, cameras and crane arms and, like a behind the scenes filming of making that commercial, and shot in a little village in Italy, and everything looks beautiful and all the characters look completely real and completely appropriate for this type of commercial. So I see it being used first in the commercial industry, where you don't need to tell a story except with a narrator voiceover, so that you don't need their synthetic actors to deliver believable lines. You just get to build a story in editing around generated images that look beautiful and are generally don't have artifacts in them like multiple fingers and things. They're getting much better at that. He also has a couple of videos on product photography. Take a look at that. All the beautiful slow-mo fruit flying through milk and that kind of stuff that looks amazing and is indistinguishable from the super high-end product photography that you'll see in most commercials.
Yeah, I think that the in areas like narrative, I mean, we shoot in Pittsburgh and tell you that it's New York, or we shoot in somewhere else and tell you that we are constantly looking for things that aren't actually the truth. So in corporate, you can't do that, but in many, many other places you can, whether that's satire or filmmaking or commercials, or all these other things are there. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't know if I think that there will be probably less B-roll, but a lot of us have been replacing B-roll with other techniques for 2 decades now, just because it's expensive. So it's easy for me to take a photograph and do camera mapping and give you the push through in Bangkok. I mean, I did a tutorial on that 20 years ago. And that was a lot cheaper than sending a crew to Bangkok to shoot an aerial. So that's the kind of the process there. Next question.
Got one in coming in from Ryan Yule in Kigali, Rwanda, asking, in film school in 1995, I got to edit my film projects on a Steenbeck flatbed. I know why they call it a cut. Literally, undo was a 2 to 5 minute round trip. Just wondering what interesting old gear of yesteryear the hosts have had fun/nightmares using.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, the kids these days are so spoiled. We used to have to make a cut and actually cut the film apart and solder it and glue it back together again. Yes, I used to own a Steenbeck. I bought a flatbed editing machine, 16 millimeter, back when we were producing commercials in Austin. My horror story about editing equipment comes from Roar, where I was the production sound mixer. And on that movie back in 1978, we had a flood. Our editing room was at the location out in a little wash in Soledad Canyon, and we had 4 chem flatbeds with the Panavision heads on them, which are very expensive anamorphic heads. You know, there were 8 plates, and these are $200,000 machines. A flood came through in the middle of the night and washed away the editing room. And the next morning we went out. I was stranded on an island and had to be taken out via a bosun's chair strung between a cable across a fast-moving river. And so the next morning we went out and discovered that just the top inch of the screens were sticking above the mud where the editing room used to be. They were completely, all these $100,000 machines were buried in mud up to the very top of them. And we dug them out and we brought them into Hollywood. And since they were purchased gray market, they couldn't, Kim would not touch them. So it was my task to get them working again. And I had to hose them down and clean every part with a dental water pick and Freon TF to get all the sand out of inside of all the motors, every bearing, every gear, every drive port, every circuit board was just covered with mud and silt. And eventually we got 3 or 4 of them actually working again. But these days, you kids are spoiled. You can do that on your laptop. You know.
Exactly. Next question.
Got one coming in from Steve in Portland, Oregon, asking, I want to use 4 PTZ cams with at least 20 times optical zoom running on Wi-Fi 2 and controlled by iPad. What models do you recommend used for a church system?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, it depends on the budget. You can go all the way up. Well, first, get the idea of Wi-Fi out of your head. I mean, unless you want to risk it. I mean, it's extremely risky. If you could get a loaner and burn it in, the PTZ Optics has some. I have one sitting right here. Actually, it's this model called the Move SE, and you could go this route. You could use something called Top Director, which is an iPad app, and you can cut NDI-HX and bring the bitrate down really low and see if it is stable. But you'll notice on the back of this camera, you've got 3G SDI and HDMI. I highly recommend using one of these other either NDI, full fat NDI coming out of that Ethernet port. But if I was going to go that route, for a middle ground, I really love the Canon CRN 300 and the 500 line because you could go all the way up to $12,000 with a BRC AM7 from Sony, which is the hot rod of the industry with a 1-inch sensor. But the CRN 300, the sensor isn't as big as the 500, but you do have that price point that allows you to get multiples at $23.99. So it depends on what you're doing and what the budget is, but I would highly recommend not even looking at trying to do this with Wi-Fi, just unless you have somebody that knows what they're doing and you can deal with some kind of hiccups or skips just in case the video does fall apart. Pretty much everybody in the chat is like, don't use Wi-Fi. Next question. Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida asks, a rumored update to Sony FX3 due soon. What upgrades do you suspect for the FX3? My guess is, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they change the form factor to something that looks more like the FX6. But the problem is then it's more like an FX6, and so they have a market there. So it'll be interesting to see what they make available. Possibly some higher frame rate. Possibly some more I/O. Those are the things. I think that there'll be minor updates if they update it, unless they really want to get aggressive. And we may be seeing this kind of aggressive attack at the bottom. And what's interesting about Blackmagic is that they're going both directions at the same time, which is very difficult for the industry to manage, which is that they have these film cameras at sub 3,000
that people are using, but they're also rolling out the 17K camera at 65 mil that's going out at the other end and going up the chain as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how people manage those two things and all the stuff that's in between over NAB. Next question.
Reina Dopopopulus in Situate asks, they say the pen is Mightier is a powerful thing, but we haven't been able to make this successfully for years. What can the industry, media, and content creators do to make this really happen?
If you're talking about the pen is mightier than the sword, you want to look at the disruption in Europe and the United States related to their electoral systems and how far that they've moved to the right. And you want to understand that the pen is absolutely mightier than the sword. And Russia has been able to execute an amazing, not in a good way, but an amazing feat of manipulating everybody else's governments with the pen and not the sword, because they've proven with fighting against Ukraine that they don't really have a sword. All they have is a pen. So you shouldn't think that it's not working. It's just not working for everybody. So next question.
Kent in Madison, Ohio asks, I know I keep asking questions about bandwidth and good remote internet connection. The Peplink was brought up multiple times. Can I buy a local cellular plan, or do I need Peplink's data plan?
Every time we've done it, we've had to do our own cellular plans, and it's painful. That's the most painful part of this whole process, is getting just SIM cards. They want to sell you a phone. They want to make this work. So working with, and the problem is a lot of times you want to get different providers into that so that you have some resiliency. There's a couple reasons for that. One is if you put, let's say, 3 Verizon SIMs into your Peplink, and it sees that Verizon sees that you're pulling all at the same time, they'll actually clamp down on that. And so, ask me how I know. so it works for a second and then it doesn't work at all. And there's some kind of safety thing inside of that cell structure to not allow you to do that. And so that's why we tend to break those up a little bit. The other thing is, this is one of the big advantages of using something like a LiveU, is that the LiveU is they manage all of that for you. So all those relationships, all those processes, everything else, they manage the process to make sure that it works. One more question.
One more. Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas,
Maybe 2
asks,
more, because this one's going to be quick.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
The new Lightbridge CRLS 2.0 features a touch-proof surface that is easy to clean, does not require gloves, and resists watermarking, staining, and oxidation. Is this a huge breakthrough? And he's got a link there to touch-proof.
I don't know anything about it. I don't think any of us do. So I think you got outside of us. Next question.
Kent in Madison, Ohio. I was wondering if you could show us the setup, the LiveU going to NAB. Also, what data are you using to get a good signal in that venue, knowing the buying data for the show is very expensive. Thanks for all you do.
So LiveU is providing the LiveU. They have in the past, and they are for this one as well. We will show it next Thursday on this show. So I'll show the whole rig in its full configuration before it gets packed up. We're just finishing up a couple of the pieces of it. I've used LiveUs at NAB for 15 years. And there's only one place in the Central Hall, and the Central Hall is not open today. This year, there's only one place in Central Hall we haven't gotten a good signal, and that is right where the Panasonic booth is, or right where the food is, right in the very center. There's just so much rebar that we think that we just suddenly go into a black hole. But outside of that, you should see that we have really good bandwidth, and we're doing 5.1 with a DPA 5100. We're going to be doing 60 frames a second, 4K. We're pretty excited about it. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one thing to note, and this falls in line with the previous question as well, is that there is something called priority data, and this is usually reserved for the emergency management systems. And so renting from LiveU or one of these bigger providers means that you don't have to go sign up for all these plans that you may turn off and turn on, but you just have it stable. And some of these units will have 8 cellular units inside. So that's a lot of bandwidth for the money. So if you don't need to do this yourself, hiring somebody in or just renting one from LiveU Direct is the best option to go with.
Absolutely. Thanks so much to the producers for all these great questions. Of course, if we sent your question back to you, it's in your notes. If you're inside of Makana, if you send it via QR code, we'll send it back and we'll try to bring it back in the next day. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much to the panelists for being part of this excellent conversation. It's so great to have you here on a Thursday talking about mostly video, but pretty much everything. We talked about food today, so we did not see that coming. So anyway, so thanks so much for being part of this conversation, and thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes this possible. There's a small village. You see the surface of us sitting here talking, but there's people that are editing, there's people that are engineering, developing, managing, all these other things that are happening for every single day, 7 days a week. We haven't missed a day for over 5 years now. So thank you so much for the whole team that makes that possible. Today, if we had done this in person, we would have traveled 37,000 miles, 60,000 kilometers, and that is 294 million. Bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. There you go.
I like to think of myself as having an audiophobic coating to repel away. I can't.
You repel what? Sometimes I find myself just repelling in general. I don't. It's not just water. So
keeps people from, especially old girlfriends, from clinging to.
Oh, there you go. All right. All right. See ya.
Have a great day.
See y'all.
Take care.
Thanks, back end crew.